If you have any good ideas for improving the content, I'd love to read them in the comments. Love. Richard Feynman said, "Never confuse education with intelligence. You can have a PhD and still be an idiot." What are some real-life examples of this? My ex-boyfriend's mother was a linguistics professor and knew over 10 languages. She was also one of the dumbest people I've ever met. Some examples: she believed that in case of emergency stewardesses catapult out of the plane. She was also convinced donating blood causes some blood disease and you can die because of it. But my favorite one was when she said her son's orthopedic problems are not a result of a serious injury he had. His knee hurts because he eats too much ketchup. Man, that ketchup is going straight to my knees. I'ma need to sit for a minute. I had a boss who was an engineer who put a couple $100 in change in a bank's pneumatic drive-through tube where it got stuck and they had to use a jackhammer to get it out. He was upset that the bank was charging him for this because he didn't know this would happen. They had large signs saying not to put change in the tubes, including on the tubes themselves. He just filled the thing with random change, not in rolls or anything? Like he thought it was a fucking coin store? That's hilarious, unless you were in line behind him. Yup, and it sunk and got stuck underground. Way too heavy for the pneumatic system to carry it to the teller. My first call at my first IT job was in a medical laboratory. There was a doctor who had been in the job for years and she called saying her computer would not power on. I walked her through some troubleshooting and nothing worked. Is the computer plugged in? Okay. Is the monitor on? Okay. When did the problem start? Type of questions were asked and she answered them all. I go up to her office and indeed the computer is plugged into a power strip which is plugged into itself. Cleaning crew had deep cleaned her office and never plugged anything back in. Doctor plugged the power strip into itself thinking that as long as it was plugged in, that's all she needed. Part of me wonders if she got the cords mixed up, like she thought what she was plugging in was something other than the power strip. Depending on the length of the cords, I could see it getting lost in the tangle and just plugging it in. The cord was only about 6 feet long and you could easily see the whole thing. I unplugged it from itself and plugged it into the wall. Easiest fix ever. It was first thing in the morning at about 7 a.m. so maybe she wasn't fully awake. I have a PhD, and I work with a bunch of PhDs. Basically, a lot of them think that because they succeeded in one area, they are an expert in every other area of life, and they always have strong opinions about everything. I think it's also called a PhD syndrome. I think my imposter syndrome cannibalized my PhD syndrome. One of the main benefits for my education was to teach me how much I don't know. It's baffling to me that people get confidence to speak on things they don't know anything about just because they're educated. Some people leave graduate programs still convinced they've never not been the smartest MFers in a room. No clue how they managed that, but they are out there. I'm an attorney. I was taking a class at my local university for a graduate program and the professor, not knowing about my day job, proclaimed that having a PhD legally gets you out of jury duty, because the law is that you're too smart to be on a jury. I spoke up and said that was simply not true. There are no restrictions on being a juror in my state, other than being a US citizen. She was pissed, like red-faced, vein-popping from the four-yard angry. She said she'll prove me wrong next class. And she never did. From what I've heard from people with PhDs is that you can get called up, but lawyers will always dismiss you immediately because they think you must have good critical thinking skills and are harder to persuade. My wife's stepfather was a chemist who currently has diabetes. One night he went to the ER because his blood sugar was dangerously high. He claimed he was eating well, he normally doesn't, so there's no reason why his blood sugar was high. In his car was a 2-liter bottle of ginger ale mixed in with grape juice. He said that the two canceled their sugars out and we didn't know what we were talking about because he was a chemist and he knows how to combine things. Holy fuck, that is insane. It is. With respect to sugar, unless you're doing a low sugar juice you've got the same numbers as soda because he doesn't drink diet. But when I was hearing this I'm just trying to imagine the taste. Ugh. This happened earlier this year and he still argues he's right. Like, dude, you add a vodka kicker to a margarita, does it suddenly cancel out the alcohol? Or is a Long Island iced tea no longer potent because you've canceled everything else out? I'm no scientist, but I've added my sodas together when I was younger and I never had suddenly regular tasting water. Edit, it's been shown to me by many Redditors that I am incorrect and that I held onto a disproven opinion that the diet soda sweetener had an increased link to cancer. I admit I am wrong, though it never stopped me from drinking Diet Dr. Pepper. Like, he might be a chemist, but that doesn't mean he knows anything useful about diabetic biochemistry. You see this with engineers a lot too. Engineers will be like, I know X because I'm an engineer. No, you're a mechanical engineer who works in design and finite element analysis. You do not have the same level of clarity on nuclear reactor maintenance. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion hasn't given you the clairvoyance needed to locate those stolen PLA. If an ancient religion was giving my boss magical telekinetic powers, you'd better believe I would not be giving them sass. Ah yes, the ancient Jedi religion from the bygone era of nearly 25 years ago. And here I am, having not gone to college for chemistry or any field of science I'm interested in, because I believe I'm not intelligent enough to be any kind of scientist. While I feel like I'm not intelligent, I also kinda wish I was dumber so I could just blindly go into things that other people do and seem to end up just fine. Lol. I actually read an article long time ago that stated dumb people are more successful than intelligent people for this very reason. An intelligent person can envision the difficulties of pursuing something and, as a result, go fuck that. A dumb person can't/won't and will just plummet head first into something hoping for the best. I didn't know that Steve Jobs was a chemist, but for real, Steve Jobs, by all regarded as one of the most brilliant marketers of all time, and when he was diagnosed with a more treatable form of pancreatic cancer, he said, "Fuck modern medicine, my organ that regulated blood sugar level? I'll just eat nothing but sugar fruit and that'll cure my struggling organ." Like someone with liver disease giving up water and committing only to drink beer. His stupidity in one area led to his death, despite his brilliance in other areas. He also bought a house in another state to jump the organ donation queue and killed the donor organ too with his stupid fruit diet. I'm literally laying in the ICU at the moment with a fresh kidney transplant, and anybody who does this shit should be banned by UNOS. I'm so incredibly grateful to the woman who died for my gift of life, and I can't wait to express my gratitude to her surviving family. Peter Duesberg, molecular biologist who works as a researcher at UC Berkeley and has an otherwise stellar career and well known for his work, became an AIDS denialist, claiming there's no link between HIV and AIDS. Led countless people down the rabbit hole, including many who were HIV positive. These individuals ended up infecting others and refusing antiretroviral therapies. This included an AIDS denialist activist named Christine Majori, who infected her infant through breastfeeding, thinking, hey, it's not a big deal, it's just HIV, it doesn't cause AIDS. Kary Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize for inventing PCR, also questioned the link between HIV and AIDS. I chatted with him on a plane once and he was indeed pretty dumb. Edit, dumb in many ways, but clearly unique and smart in others. I'm not here to bash Kary Mullis because PCR is cool as hell and he seemed cool in some ways too. Met him once after a lecture at the university I was working at. It was amazing to me how he stuck to his mantra of just a surfer dude researcher who single-handedly conceived of PCR and conveniently left out the dozens of other scientists and technicians who helped with the preceding work and subsequent refinement of the process. Yeah, it was funny because when I met him I was seated with him and another scientist on a plane to Boston, of course. I was telling them both about some stuff I did with a fancy at the time version of PCR and he just listened and then talked about surfing, mostly, and I was thinking, who is this bozo? When I got off the plane, the other scientist was like, it's not every day you meet a Nobel laureate, and I was like, what? Who was that? And that's when he told me who it was. He had gotten Mullis' card and gave it to me, and I still have it somewhere. Also, during an acid trip, so it kinda still tracks. Haha, that's a pretty interesting encounter. I had a similar, though not as impressive, one on a place to East Africa. This lovely woman next to me was asking why I was traveling there, so I told her that I was living there, doing NIH-funded research. Before we got off the plane, she handed me her card. She was the top CDC representative in the country we were traveling to. Good contact to have. I was at a keg party at college and the gravity keg was set up. Someone complained that the beer was not flowing, so I checked that the keg was still almost full. Turns out someone closed the air intake on top. I opened the intake and poured myself a beer. Problem solved. A few minutes later someone else complains the beer is out. I told them the keg was full a few minutes ago and it was a tap problem that I fixed. They told me they just came from the keg. I go back to the keg and find the intake was closed again. Opened it and poured the young lady who said it was empty a beer. As she is leaving, my sweet mate comes in and goes to the intake and closes it. Now my sweet mate is a straight A student who gets all his mostly due to his photographic memory. Back to the keg. So I tell him that he needs to leave the intake open to let air in to displace the beer coming out of the lower tap. He then proceeds to tell me that since the beer is carbonated, air is not needed to replace the liquid volume lost when the beer is dispensed. So I asked him 2 questions: if it is not needed, why is there the upper tap? And does he really think the amount of gas the carbonation gives off in a glass of beer is equal to the volume of the liquid beer? He thought for a few seconds and his only response was, "I have a 4.0, what is your GPA?" Then he walked away. I seriously fucking hope that was not a real response. I went to 3 ERs when I felt something was wrong with my arm. It felt like a bug bite day 1 and by day 4 a bungee cord from my elbow to my wrist. 3 doctors said it was a skin irritation or dermatitis. I kept telling them something was wrong. I have no medical degree. I work in property management. Day 5 I walked into another ER and said I don't care if I have to pay out of pocket or sit here all night, but something is wrong with my arm. Finally, after many rude looks and comments, I was given an ultrasound of my arm. Then rushed to a MRI. Then told I was being admitted. A 3-inch blood clot in my upper arm, 2 in my chest area, and 1 had passed my lung already. Diagnosed with factor 2 gene mutation 22 days later, blood clotting disorder. Damn. Good for you being persistent. That is pretty wild that they missed that. I'm glad you did finally get a proper diagnosis. Did you call back to the other places to tell them what asses they were? Never called the others back. Doubt they would have cared. Thank you for watching. In the comments below the video you can write where you have met a person who has a university degree but remains an idiot.